All right, everyone. Welcome back to our Produce Spotlight class series, where we are focusing all on fall produce, right? I know some of us might be like itching for the holiday season, and then there's others of us who are still trying to hold on to that essence of fall. So I really hope for those fall folks that are out there, this does that for you today as we talk all about butternut squash. I'm Shayna, one of the dietitians, once again, and so happy to be along with you for this class today. What we are going to be covering here, I have in our agenda. I love some good fun facts, so we're going to throw those in there about butternut squash, but then also some tips and tricks about butternut squash. I think it's one of those produce items that can be a little bit intimidating. So we're going to talk about how to store it, how to prep it, clean it, all of that good stuff. And then, of course, we're here in the dietitian classes. We've got to talk about nutrition. So we're going to talk about why it's beneficial to incorporate this wonderful item into your day, as well as some products that we carry in our stores with butternut squash. But we are actually going to kick off the class with our featured recipe today, just because I want it to be cooking and ready to go for us by the end of the class. So the recipe that we're doing today, it's a fun one, okay? It's a butternut squash and chorizo taco, which I've never done before. I've used butternut squash in a lot of different ways, usually soup. I love a good butternut squash soup. I think most of us on the team do. But this is a fun and different, unique way to use it. You could make this vegetarian if you wanted to skip out on the chorizo, of course. You'll see here in a second how simple the ingredients they are, that you could do that. Okay, but both of the links, whether you shop at a Giant store or a Martin store, they are there. Once again, super simple in the way of ingredients, only 5 here. We have the butternut squash itself. You can use our cubed butternut squash from our stores, which is what I'm going to be doing today, or you could cut and clean your own, which we will talk through that process then. We have the chorizo, which, like I said, we could take that out if you would prefer, as well as some black beans. We're going to be using tortillas today, of course, for our tacos. And then the recipe calls to cut up an avocado to put on top. Avocado, not my jam, actually allergic to it. So I'm going to be swapping that out and using pico instead. You could just use regular salsa, whatever you want. Maybe you don't want a topping, but I felt like it needed a little pop of color on the top of it. Here are the directions. Once again, pretty easy. I'm going to walk you through them right now. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We'll come back to this presentation in a moment. And I am going to stop this video and pull up our ingredients over here. So that's what you should be seeing right now, our ingredients to make the tacos. Okay, so I've done a few steps to start us off here. The first one would be working with the butternut squash. Like I mentioned, I decided to go with our already diced butternut squash from our produce section. We have both regular and organic. I'll be real with you guys. I typically just buy the regular, but pretty popular item in my store. We were out of it yesterday, so grab the organic instead, which is equally great. And we place that into a bowl with 1/4 cup of water, cover it with plastic wrap, and then we steam that in the microwave for 8 minutes. Okay, so I already did that. I did season it with just a touch of salt and pepper. Okay, and it is nice and tender. Okay, still warm here. Now, we are going to be adding that to a skillet with chorizo that I've also already taken care of. I'll show you in a moment, but this is the chorizo that I'm using today. And if you're not familiar with chorizo, it is pork, okay? And what makes chorizo is the spices that are added to it, okay? There's 2 different types of chorizo. There's Spanish chorizo and Mexican. Spanish is smoked and ready to eat, whereas Mexican chorizo, which is what this is raw and needs to be cooked. Okay, but the fun thing about chorizo is that there are spices added to it. All right, so These are tacos. We don't need a seasoning packet because our chorizo is already seasoned. On the back here, it will show us up top. I know it's kind of hard to see, but we have the pork itself, and then we have paprika, a little bit of salt, garlic powder, other spices like chili pepper and cilantro, as well as some vinegar. Okay, so that's what makes chorizo chorizo if you weren't aware. Now, for this recipe, we only need 4 ounces. This is a 16-ounce pack. So I simply cut it in half, cut it again, and I did a quarter of it in my pan over here. So you know I love to say this. Let's pan over to my pan. Aha, there it is. Okay, there we go. Okay, so it's, as you can see here, it's not a lot. I'm going to turn my burner back on. It's not a lot, all right? It was just a quarter of that pack, and I just browned it in my skillet here for about 6 to 8 minutes. And why is it not that much? Because we're mainly going to be focusing on the heartiness of the taco being that butternut squash as well as some black beans, which I'll show you in a moment. But this nice amount of chorizo is going to give the taco mixture a good bit of flavor without overdoing it in the way of fat and salt content, and just, a little bit of texture to our tacos. So I'm going to go ahead and add that steamed butternut squash in there with it. And right now, everything is cooked and pretty much ready to go. We're just marrying flavors along here, okay? So I'm going to mix that in with my chorizo. This is a super quick and easy recipe. Yes, I did 2 steps ahead of time, but they weren't any crazy steps, right? I microwaved the squash and I browned the chorizo. That's all I've done so far. I now have this pan back on medium, and I'm going to be adding to it some of our low sodium black beans, okay? So of course, concern with canned goods all the time is the sodium content. Pick up either our low sodium or our no salt added beans as well as other veggies to help in that respect, okay? So I have already drained and even gave them another rinse, my black beans here, but then I'm going to toss in with our butternut squash and chorizo. Just gonna give this a mix. Like I said, I have it on medium. Now, guys, I don't want you to panic. Since my burner is a bit smaller, I'm going to turn my bridge on. So this one is going to light up back here. I'm aware, I know, okay, but just so it can fully help with this pan. I might have said this to you guys before. I know I've said it to Jenna, but I've seen this thing online where it says you might not know it, but as an adult, you have a favorite burner on your stove. And if you think about it, like next time you go to cook, you'll find yourself and be like, oh yeah, I always use that burner. And this is the burner I always use, even though it's not big enough for some of my pots. But in reality, too, from a technical standpoint, my computer is over here to the right covering the other burner. So that's the big reason we're not using it. But you just check yourself next time you go to cook something on the stove. You have a favorite burner, you just don't know it. Okay, so this needs to cook for about 6 to 8 minutes, all right, or however long I decide to ramble on our presentation here. So I'm gonna let that go, and I'm going to reshare my screen. So while that cooks, we can chat some more about butternut squash, okay? So as promised, the fun facts, they might not be super fun, but they're facts nonetheless. Butternut squash is a part of the winter squash family. Top producers of butternut squash, the #1 there is actually going to be Michigan, but California, Florida, New York, also big producers. I'm just going to say it again, Florida. I wish I was still there and some warm weather. Butternut squash is harvested in late summer or early fall, and it is named butternut squash because it has that buttery, smooth texture as well as a nutty flavor profile. Now, here are those tips and tricks, all right? How do we want to store a butternut squash? If you have a whole intact butternut squash, we want to store it in a cool, dark place, similar to potatoes, for up to 3 months. Okay. What's going to help with that storage even more is if that stem is intact at the top. Okay. That stem there is going to help the squash retain its moisture while it's stored. Now, if you have cut butternut squash, whether you cut it yourself or you picked it up from our stores, you can have it covered with plastic wrap in the fridge for about 4 to 5 days. If you are purchasing a whole intact squash, how do we get into that? All right. What you want to do is you want to cut off both ends. All right. And then cut it in half so then you can then remove the seeds. And then from there, it depends on what you want to do with it. Maybe you want to leave the skin on because you're roasting those halves in the oven. Which I will say, if your ultimate goal is to take the skin off, I would do it after roasting because it's just going to peel right back. But if you need cubes, peel it ahead of time, then cube it. I'm going to be honest with you guys. Ever since I found out that we carried it already cut and cubed, I was like, that's what I'm doing. Unless I do want to roast it in the oven in its whole state. Now, sometimes if you do decide to go that direction, this is where that intimidation comes in. Like, it's kind of hard to cut through, right? So the suggestion here, my trick is to prick it with a fork and then put it in the microwave for about 3 to 5 minutes on high power, and it will really help to soften up that squash to make it easier to cut. I do that with really any type of squash, especially spaghetti squash is a big one I do that with. So give that a go if you are struggling to cut it. Now, in terms of the nutrition benefits, why do we want to incorporate butternut squash in our day? The big one is going to be there at the top, and that is fiber. Okay, this is a great fibrous food that can potentially help with digestion as well as support heart health, specifically your cholesterol. Okay, butternut squash contains both insoluble and soluble fiber, meaning that it can help with the digestion, but that soluble fiber can also help with our cholesterol too. Vitamin A, it's responsible for that beautiful orange color of our butternut squash, also known as beta carotene, which converts into vitamin A in our bodies. The big one there is going to be that it helps to support eye health. So, we talk all year long about carrots and being great for our eyes, but this time of year, things like butternut squash and pumpkin will also do the trick. Vitamin C, there's a good bit of vitamin C in the butternut squash as well. If you've been hanging out with me for a while, you know what I love to say about vitamin C, and that is that it is our body's bodyguard when it comes to immune health. So vitamin C is going to help protect our tissues and our skin and keep the integrity of those things healthy. And if those things, which are the outside barrier to the world and germs, are healthy, then vitamin C acts as something to help protect against things like colds and flus and viruses because it's helped protect our tissues, that barrier. Okay, so lots of things have vitamin C. Butternut squash is no less. But butternut squash also has potassium. Things that are high in potassium can definitely help with regulating our blood pressure. So we talked earlier about, watching our sodium when it comes to the canned goods. The butternut squash is just going to help further along with that. Okay. Just giving our taco mixture here a little mix. I'm going to turn it down on low because I think it's pretty ready to go there. Now, here's a question about butternut squash. Is it a fruit or is it a vegetable? What does that mean in our nutrition work? Okay. Botanically, it is considered a fruit, but from a nutrition standpoint, we do think of it as a vegetable. Usually from a culinary standpoint, we think about it as being a vegetable too, using it in more savory dishes, but also sweet sometimes. But the thing with it being a vegetable from a nutrition standpoint is that we do need to understand that it is considered a starchy vegetable. So that means we need to count butternut squash similar to things like potatoes and corn and peas, okay? It is going to count as a carbohydrate if you are someone who is diabetic or pre-diabetic and watching those types of numbers. 1 cup of diced butternut squash is going to be 16 grams of carb, or 1 carb choice if you count them that way. Is that okay? Absolutely, it's okay. All right. We need carbohydrates to fuel our body, fuel our brains, fuel our day. And this is a really good carbohydrate to have because it also has a very low glycemic index, which means things that are carbohydrates are put on this line to see how quickly they impact our blood sugar. Butternut squash is going to be a pretty slow and gradual impact. So we shouldn't see the spikes. Butternut squash compared to eating a piece of candy, for example. The candy is going to spike your blood sugar. The butternut squash really shouldn't. Okay. It also, once again, we talked about, has a lot of fiber. Fiber is our friend in the way of blood sugar to help slow down that spike as well. So all around, it's a really good vegetable option, even if you are diabetic. Now, how about the seeds and the skin? Okay, both of them are edible. So the skin, if you are roasting it in the oven, it can not only become tender, but almost crispy in nature. So it's fun to just snack on, or if you are making a soup, you don't have to peel that away. You could just blend it right in. And that skin is where a lot of fiber is going to be. Now, don't get me wrong, there's still fiber throughout the whole squash. Okay, don't want you to think that we have to eat the skin to get that fiber, but we will get more if we are leaving that intact. The seeds, also a really great nutrition powerhouse. You'll see down there at the bottom, they contain good unsaturated fats, which support our heart health. They also have a decent amount of zinc. Zinc is one of those nutrients, I like to say, even more so than vitamin C, that we like to focus on to help promote our immune health, especially this time of year. So to use the seeds, you want to clean them, dry them completely, season them up however you would like, and then you can roast them in the oven at 350 for 15 to 20 minutes. Now, what do we carry in our stores in the way of butternut squash? I've mentioned these ones already. You can buy the whole intact butternut squash. You can buy it cubed and ready to go in our produce department along the wall. Whether you would like regular or organic from our Nature's Promise line, we have both. We also have butternut squash frozen here for you. So some different options in the way of that. That can be great, to just have in a pinch, or if butternut squash is not in season, having these in the freezer can be a good option. We also carry canned butternut squash. And I feel like this is one that's not talked about as much, but it's used very similarly to pumpkin. Okay, so if you're making a pumpkin pie and you don't have pumpkin, but you happen to have canned butternut squash, you can use that instead, all right? Or you could, if you have a lot of butternut squashes and you want to cook them and puree them and then save them yourself for something like a pie, I think that can work well too. But oftentimes this canned butternut squash is going to be used in some savory dishes like making soup, pasta sauce, making your own butternut squash pasta sauce can be a big one. Even using it as a substitution for a pizza sauce. So kind of a whole different take on pizza in the way of that. And then, of course, baking. I saw something this morning about mixing it into your mashed potatoes, which I think sounds really fun because I'm not a big sweet potato gal, but I love the orange color. And butternut squash, very similar to pumpkin, does not have a whole lot of flavor. So you might be looking at this and being like, how am I going to use it in these ways? Butternut squash, pumpkin, purees, they don't have a lot of flavor. What you think of flavor for both of these items is actually spices like cinnamon and sugar. Okay. But plain as they are, they're pretty bland. So you could make your mashed potatoes pretty and orange without a strong squash flavor to them. Same thing with like your pasta sauces and whatnot. I will say, your mind can play tricks on you in the sense that the first time I've used butternut squash as like a pasta sauce, I think it was like a butternut squash and sage sauce. You bite it thinking it's going to be cheese. because it's orange, but it's not anything cheesy. All right. So you have to have that in your head that that's not going to happen. Here we also have some already pre-made butternut squashes pre-made butternut squash soups in our stores. I like this one in particular because it is light in sodium. So this one has 200 milligrams of sodium, which is close to that low sodium mark compared to a lot of the other butternut squash soups are going to be 500 or more. Okay, so a good option there. All right. I'm going to share this slide here with you real quick before we finish up our tacos, just so you can see what is coming up the rest of the week. Tomorrow, Jenna will be here during the Wellbeing Connection class for a really nice class called Ask the Dietitian, where you can ask her some different questions. So she'll be available for that tomorrow. And then I will be back on Thursday. We will be making a Thanksgiving app board featuring grapes from California. So if you guys have been with me for a while, you know I love making boards. It's been a hot minute since we've made one here on a class, but I love making boards. So I'm excited to do that with you on Thursday. And it is the week of Shayna and Jenna. So we will be back on Friday for coffee chat at 9 a.m. for National Pomegranate Month. Okay. So let's look back here at our tacos. Things are looking good. They are smelling good. I'm really excited about this. Let's go ahead and plate these. Okay, so move back over here to our ingredients. Get some stuff out of the way. All right, let's see here what we got. Let's get these tortillas out. Okay. Kind of reset up there. So here are our tortillas. Recipe calls for corn tortillas. Guys, corn tortillas are not my jam. They're just not. Hold on, I need to open this. Don't judge me. But yeah, I'm just not a fan of corn tortillas. So I'm using the flour one. Let me get one out here. Okay, here we go. You can warm this up in the microwave if you would like to. I think that they are just nice and delicious as they are. So now I'm going to scoop some of our mixture on there, like so. I feel like I need a little bit more butternut squash over here. Yes, perfect. Maybe one more. I went there. Yes, okay. So we have our mixture on there. It is simply just chorizo, butternut squash, and black beans. Here is that pico. Now, like I said, you can do avocado on there, whatever you would like. I'm not even going to tell you guys how long it took me to figure out how to open these containers back in the day. Now I'm a pro. Okay. Let me get my spoon. So I'm going to jazz this up here with this fresh pico. Okay. It's going to be fully. All right. Maybe a little more like so. And then you're just going to wrap it up and you have your taco. Yum, delicious. I'm so excited to eat it. It's going to be so great. Let me bring the camera back here. Okay. All right, everyone. Well, that was pretty much it. Like I said, short and sweet, simple recipe today that I think you can make really quickly and easy for lunch. So I just want to thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. Once again, this is what's coming up the rest of the week. So hang out with Jenna and I to finish out this week of November. And at this time, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A at this time. But otherwise, I want to thank you once again for spending some time with me, and I hope you take care the rest of your day.